Hey, it's Sherry. If you've ever been stuck in a place you didn't choose, an airport, a hotel, a life, this letter is for you. Come here, sit with me for a moment, and let me tell you what happened when one woman's cancelled flight woke her body up again. Storm-stolen night with a stranger. Dear Sherry. If the storm hadn't rolled in over the city like a slow, sulking animal, I would have been somewhere over the clouds instead of standing in a fluorescent airport hall, staring at the departures board turning into a wall of angry red letters. Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. It had been a long month. The kind of month that ends not with a neat conclusion, but with you dragging your suitcase behind you like a tired limb, wondering when exactly your life had begun to feel like a series of delays and layovers. I was going home from a work trip that had also been a quiet escape after a breakup. 4 years together ended with one too calm conversation at a kitchen table. No plates thrown, no screaming, just two people folding a life into separate piles. By the time I checked my bag in that morning, I was mostly just empty. The storm decided it wasn't finished with me. When the announcement came, people around me groaned, rolled their eyes, started swearing in different languages. I just stood there, watching the word cancelled blink next to my flight number. Passengers on flight 762 to London, please proceed to the service desk. The queue for the desk snaked across the hall. I joined it mechanically, pulling my carry-on behind me. That's when I noticed him. He was about 2 people ahead of me in the line. Dark jeans, grey t-shirt, jacket slung over his shoulder. Early 40s maybe. Shoulders that suggested he actually used the gym membership most people keep just for their conscience. A day or 2 of stubble. He had a book in his hand, thumb marking the page, and the kind of quiet attention in his posture that made him stand out in a crowd of people glued to their phones. He glanced back once as the line shifted. Our eyes met for half a second. No sparks, no slow motion. Just a moment of 2 strangers acknowledging, "You too, huh?" The queue crawled. People complained. Someone tried to argue with the airline staff as if they could personally stop the storm. When it was his turn, I heard the woman behind the desk explain, in that tired, trained voice, that the airline would provide hotel vouchers for the night, that there would be buses to take us there, that they were very sorry for the inconvenience. He took it with a little half smile that said he knew she had repeated the same script 50 times. When my turn came, I got the same speech, same apology, same small, sad piece of paper with the name of an airport hotel on it. I stuffed the voucher into my pocket and turned away from the desk, feeling the first real wave of exhaustion hit. The stranger with the book was standing a few meters away, looking at his own voucher, then up at the chaos around us. His eyes flicked to me again. "This place is starting to feel like purgatory," he said. His voice was low, warm, with a trace of an accent that might have been somewhere between London and somewhere else. "Purgatory probably has better coffee," I replied. The corner of his mouth curled. "You heading to the same glamorous palace?" he asked, lifting his voucher. I stepped closer and held mine up. "Same hotel." "Looks like it," I said. "We could file a complaint," he said calmly. "Demand at least 3 stars and a working soul." I snorted, unexpected laughter breaking through the fog in my chest. It felt nice. The bus to the hotel was half empty. Most passengers were muttering into phones, arranging new flights, complaining to partners, bosses, friends. It was nearly midnight by the time we boarded, the city outside slick and shining from the rain, street lights smearing into long gold lines on the wet tarmac. I ended up in a seat by the window. He took the aisle seat across from me. We didn't talk, but I was aware of him the way you're aware of a heater in a cold room. Quiet, steady, radiating something you can feel even from a little distance. As we pulled away from the terminal, the storm finally let loose properly. Rain hammered against the bus windows. Thunder rolled somewhere above the low clouds. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass and watched the airport lights disappear behind us. For a moment, I had that strange feeling of being suspended between places, between decisions, between lives. Then I felt someone drop into the seat next to me. It was him. There's a family of 4 behind us currently negotiating the terms of a peace treaty involving screen time and crisps, he said. I'm not brave enough to stay in front of that for 20 minutes. I smiled, turning my head from the window. Consider this a refugee seat then, I said. His shoulder brushed mine as he settled in. It wasn't intentional, but he didn't apologize or snatch himself away. He just stayed, an inch of warmth pressing into my upper arm. My name's Daniel, he said, almost as an afterthought. Maya, I replied. Nice to be stranded with you, Maya, he said. Something about the way he said it, simple, unapologetically direct, made a small dormant part of me sit up. The hotel was exactly what you'd expect an airport hotel to be at midnight in a storm. Slightly too bright, slightly too clean, slightly too empty of anything resembling personality. The lobby was all beige and chrome. The air smelled faintly of air conditioning and the ghost of someone's perfume from earlier in the day. We shuffled in with our suitcases and vouchers, a straggling group of accidental refugees from the sky. At the front desk, 2 overworked staff members processed us in a slow, steady rhythm. Room keys, directions to the lifts, breakfast times. Is the bar still open? Someone asked. Closed at 11, the woman behind the counter replied. I'm sorry. A collective groan floated through the air. I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I wanted a drink. Not to get drunk, just something warm and bitter and adult in my hand to mark the end of a long day and a longer month. I got my key and turned away from the desk, already resigned to going to my room, washing my face and falling into bed like a rock. Then I felt a light touch at my elbow. Daniel. He nodded his head slightly towards a sign behind the reception. BAR, Level 1. Closed. If the storm gets to cancel your flight, he said, the universe owes you at least 1 drink. The bar's closed, I pointed out. He looked at me with that same little almost smile I'd seen by the service desk. Closed to people who follow the rules, he said. Something in me sparked. Normally, I'm the kind of woman who follows the rules, who cues correctly, who doesn't cause problems, who apologizes if someone else bumps into her. But that night, with my hair still damp from the rain, my makeup half worn off, my life rearranged and my plans cancelled, the idea of not following one small rule felt delicious. I lifted my keycard between 2 fingers like a dare. All right, rule breaker, I said. Lead the way. The corridor to the bar was dimly lit, carpeted in that anonymous pattern all hotels seem to have. The bar itself, visible through 2 glass doors, was dark, rows of bottles glinting faintly from the emergency light, bar stools lined up like soldiers off duty. Daniel tried the door handle. It didn't budge. "Of course," I said. "Your plan has a lot of visual appeal but lacks realism." He didn't look disappointed. If anything, his eyes lit up a little. "There's always a way," he murmured. He stepped closer to the door, studying the lock, the gap between the two glass panels, the hinge. "You look like a man who's done this before," I said. "I look like a man who spent too much of his life in hotels," he replied. "Sometimes the only thing between you and a drink is a lazy closing shift." He ran his fingers along the frame, then his hand closed around the metal bar of the push door. "Come here," he said. Not a question, not a plea, just a low, quiet instruction. I found myself stepping closer without even thinking about it, drawn into the small pool of shadow where he was standing. He guided my hand to the bar with his palm warm over the back of my hand. "Push when I say," he murmured. His body was close now, the heat of him clear through the thin fabric of my shirt. I could smell him. Soap, a hint of cologne, something warm and human under it all. He wedged his foot against the bottom of the door, adjusted his grip, then said, "Now." We both leaned our weight into the bar. There was a brief resistance, a faint creak, and then, suddenly, the door gave way with a soft, protesting squeak. It wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no flashing lights, just the quiet thrill of stepping into a dark, forbidden room with a stranger's hand still resting against yours. Inside, the bar felt different in the half-dark, more intimate. The shapes of chairs and tables softened. The mirrored wall behind the shelves reflected long, ghostly lines of light. Daniel let the door swing shut behind us, the soft click of it closing sounding strangely final. "Congratulations," he said. "We are now officially criminals." "International bar offenders," I added. "Best kind," he replied. The bar didn't require much breaking into at all in the end. A quick search behind the counter revealed that the fridge was still humming and very much full, and the bottles above were exactly where they'd been when the bartender had closed up. Daniel slipped behind the bar with a familiarity that made me raise an eyebrow. "Are you secretly a bartender?" I asked, perching on a stool. "No," he said, pulling out a couple of glasses. "But I travel a lot for work. You learn the art of making something decent out of whatever's left." "Improvise for me then," I said. He looked up at me for a long second. I felt the weight of his gaze like a hand between my shoulder blades. "Whiskey?" he asked. "How did you know?" I asked back. "You look like someone who drinks the thing she actually wants, not the thing people expect her to order," he said simply. That line should have been cheesy. It wasn't. He poured 2 measures into low, heavy glasses, added a single ice cube to each, slid one across the bar to me. Our fingers brushed around the glass. His touch was casual and not casual at all. "To cancelled flights," he said. "To bad timing," I replied. The whiskey was warm and smoky, burning a slow path down my throat to my stomach. I could feel it spreading through my chest like a small, controlled fire. We talked. Not in the shallow, default way you talk when you're killing time, but in the way you talk when you know you will absolutely, definitely, never see this person again, and that gives you a kind of freedom. He told me he was a consultant of some kind, the kind of job that meant airports and hotels and too many coffees in paper cups. Divorced. One teenage daughter who thought his taste in music was a crime. I told him I'd just ended a 4-year relationship. No dramatic betrayal, just a slow erosion. I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd been genuinely excited to see him, I said. And he about you? Daniel asked. I thought about it. I think he was comfortable, I said quietly. And I think I was efficient. I organized our life, paid bills, planned things. But I don't know if either of us looked at the other and thought, if I don't touch you soon, I'm going to come apart. Daniel took a sip of his drink, eyes on mine over the rim of the glass. That's a dangerous feeling to live without for too long, he said. Dangerous how? I asked. You start convincing yourself you don't need it, he replied, until something or someone reminds you that you do. And then the crack between what you have and what you want can swallow you whole. He said it so quietly I almost missed the way his gaze drifted for a second, as if he were looking at some empty hotel room in his own past. You sound like you know that crack pretty well, I said. I've walked around its edge more than once, he answered, a wry twist to his mouth. Got good at pretending I don't mind the view. Something in my chest softened at that. He wasn't a fantasy man without a past. He was just as breakable as me. At some point, he came out from behind the bar and sat on the stool beside me instead. We leaned on our elbows, shoulders almost touching, glasses between us. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic confessions. Just that slow, humming awareness, growing. The way his knee brushed mine and stayed. The way our faces were closer now when we talked, our voices lower. The way my eyes kept dropping to his mouth when he spoke, as if they'd forgotten where they were supposed to rest. At one point, he made some comment about being technically too old to be breaking into bars. Speak for yourself, I said softly. I feel exactly the right age to be doing something slightly stupid. His laugh was low, surprised. It did something to my stomach. I don't know which of us moved first. I just know there was a moment when I turned my stool fully towards him, sliding one knee between his thighs, and he didn't pull back. His hand came to rest on my leg just above the knee, fingers warm against my skin through the fabric. You know this is a terrible idea, he murmured. Yes, I said, holding his gaze. That's half the appeal. Then I reached up, caught the front of his t-shirt in my fist, and pulled him to me. The first contact of his mouth on mine wasn't a question. I kissed him like I'd been wanting to do it from the second we stood in that line together, and he met me with the same contained hunger I'd felt coiled in him all evening. His hand tightened on my leg, sliding up the outside of my thigh, anchoring me to the stool and closer to him at the same time. Heat shot through me, sharp and bright. When we finally broke apart for air, both of us were breathing a little too hard. Right, he said hoarsely. So we're doing this. I didn't answer with words. I just swung my other leg over so I was straddling his lap on that bar stool, dress riding up my thighs, my hands on either side of his face as I kissed him again, deeper. His quiet curse vibrated against my mouth. We didn't stay in the bar much longer. He slid off the stool with me still close, my legs tightening around him for a second as I landed on my feet. His hands found my hips, steadying me, thumbs pressing into the soft flesh there in a way that made it very hard to remember that we were standing in a room that technically belonged to the hotel and not to whatever this was between us. We left the bar like two teenagers doing something they knew they'd remember years later. He flicked the lock back into place, and we slipped into the corridor. The hotel quiet around us, the thick carpet muffling our steps. We barely made it past the first stretch of empty wall. This time it was me who stopped, catching his wrist and tugging him towards me so that his back hit the cool wallpaper with a soft thud. His eyes widened a fraction, then darkened as I rose up on my toes and kissed him hard, my fingers sliding into his hair. He answered with a low sound that lit every nerve in my body. His hands travelled from my waist to my lower back, then lower, fingers spreading, pulling me flush against him. I could feel exactly how much he wanted me, and that knowledge sent a delicious, terrifying rush through me. We moved like that down the corridor, kissing, stumbling, resetting, stealing another mouthful of each other like we were drinking from the same glass and neither of us wanted to put it down. At some point he spun us, my back now against the wall, his mouth on that spot just below my ear, breath hot, stubble scraping lightly against my neck. I heard myself laugh, breathless, half from the clumsiness of bouncing off a fire extinguisher cabinet, half from the sheer ridiculous joy of it. Somewhere in the middle of the laughter and the heat, I became aware of the small, rectangular weight of my keycard pressed between my fingers. I think, I managed, lips brushing his jaw. This is my room. We had stopped in front of a door. The number blurred a little in my vision. Convenient, he said, his voice low and rough now. I fumbled with the card, hands not quite obeying me. It slipped once. He caught my wrist gently, steadying it, guiding the keycard into the slot. The light blinked green. He pushed the handle down and looked at me, not asking anything, not announcing anything, just giving me the space of one heartbeat to change my mind. I didn't. I stepped backwards into the room, still holding his t-shirt, and brought him with me. The door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the hallway and the rest of the world. Hotel rooms are not romantic by design. Neutral artwork, neutral colours, a bed that has held 100 strangers and 1,000 business trips. But that night, in the soft light from the bedside lamp I flicked on almost absently, the room felt like a small, secret country we'd slipped into without passports. We stood there for a second, just looking at each other. My chest was heaving. My lips were swollen. I could feel the faint tremor in my own hands. You can still tell me to go, he said quietly. Not hesitant, just stating a fact. I shook my head. Don't, I said. I'm tired of watching my own life from the gate. Something like pride flickered across his face. Come here then, he said. This time I didn't wait for him. I crossed the few steps between us and kissed him again, slower now, but deeper, rolling the taste of him over my tongue like something I'd been starving for without knowing it. My hands slid under his t-shirt, fingers meeting warm skin and the solid muscle of his back. He sucked in a breath when my nails grazed along his spine. Okay, he muttered against my mouth. That's not fair. Complain later, I said. I grasped the hem of his shirt and pulled it up. He lifted his arms without making a production out of it, and the fabric slipped over his head, landing somewhere on the carpet with a soft whisper. For a moment, I just looked. At the line of his collarbones, at the way his chest rose and fell, a little faster than his calm tone suggested, at the faint trail of hair leading down from his navel, disappearing into his jeans. The wanting that moved through me then was clean and bright and sharp. I stepped closer, pressing my palms flat against his chest. His skin was warm under my hands. I could feel his heartbeat, steady but strong. He reached for the zip of my dress, but didn't immediately pull it down. His fingers rested there for a second, just under the small of my back. the weight of his hand making it very clear what he wanted and just as clear that he would wait if I didn't. I answered by turning in his arms, gathering my hair over one shoulder and baring my spine to him. The sound of the zipper sliding down tooth by tiny tooth was indecent all by itself. Cool air kissed my back where fabric had been a second ago. His mouth followed, a warm contrast, pressing a slow line of open-mouthed kisses from the nape of my neck down between my shoulder blades. My knees almost forgot their job. I let the dress fall, stepping out of it and turning back to face him in my bra and panties, suddenly aware of every inch of my own skin. He looked at me in a way I hadn't seen in a long time on any man's face, not assessing, not comparing, not politely appreciative, just hungry and grateful at once. "Better," he said simply. There was no flattery in it, no performance. It felt like a statement of fact. I closed the distance, wrapping my arms around his neck, pressing my almost naked body to his, reveling in the way he drew in a sharp breath and his hands immediately found my waist, fingers sinking into my flesh like he'd been waiting for exactly this. The rest blurred into a series of sensations and choices more than a list of events. His hands mapping the lines of my ribs, fingers splaying over my stomach with a care that didn't try to flatten or fix anything, just claim it. My fingers in his hair, tugging just enough to drag a low sound from his throat that made heat pool low between my thighs. The feel of his jeans against the bare skin of my legs as I hooked one thigh around him for balance and then didn't bother to unhook it. At some point we stumbled to the bed, half falling onto it in a tangle of limbs and muffled laughter. I ended up on top of him first, palms planted on either side of his shoulders, my hair falling like a curtain around us. He looked up at me with an expression I couldn't remember anyone ever giving me while I was above them. Not amused, not condescending, not surprised, just openly, unashamedly turned on. I rolled my hips, testing, feeling the answering tension in his body, the way his hands clamped around my thighs. The contact sent a sharp, exquisite current straight through me. "Jesus, Maya," he said, voice rough, "you're going to kill me." "Good," I murmured. "I've been half dead for months." He sat up in one smooth movement, chest pressed to mine, arms wrapping around my back as he flipped us, laying me down on the mattress without breaking the kiss. The rest of what happened is ours. The exact places his mouth found, the paths his hands drew over my skin, the particular sounds he pulled from my throat. Those are the details I want to keep pressed between the pages of that night like a flower I'm not ready to flatten into a specimen. What I can tell you is this: he didn't rush. He didn't perform. He explored. Every gasp, every arch of my back, every time my fingers dug into his shoulders or pulled him closer, he took it as a map. He followed it, doubled back when he found something that made my breath catch, treated my body like a country he had been given one night to cross and chose, very deliberately, not to sprint through. For the first time in a long time, I stopped thinking. Stopped thinking about how I looked. Stopped thinking about whether I was too much or not enough. Stopped thinking about the version of me other people saw. All that existed was the weight of him, the heat of skin against skin, the delicious, dizzying build and breaking and building again of pleasure under my rib cage. At some point, I heard my own voice say his name in a way I hadn't said anyone's name in years. That, more than anything, made me realize how asleep I'd been. In the morning, the storm had moved on. I woke to a pale stripe of light slipping through the gap in the blackout curtains, painting a line across the carpet. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then I felt the weight and warmth of Daniel's arm draped over my waist, his breath slow and even against the back of my neck. Somewhere far away, a plane took off, the low rumble vibrating faintly through the walls. My first feeling wasn't guilt or panic. It was an unfamiliar, quiet peace. I slid carefully out from under his arm and sat on the edge of the bed, looking back at him. In sleep, the lines at the corners of his eyes had softened. He looked younger, or maybe just unguarded. I could have stayed. We could have gone down for the sad buffet breakfast together, exchanged numbers, made vague promises to stay in touch. We didn't. When he stirred awake, we shared something else instead. We shared a smile that said, "We both know exactly what this was." We showered separately, dressed, packed our things. He watched me tie my hair up, sliding the last elastic in place, and said, "For what it's worth, you look a lot more alive this morning than you did under that departures board." "You're partly to blame," I said. "Happy to accept partial responsibility," he replied. He walked me down to the lobby, our suitcases rolling side by side. At the front doors, someone announced that flights had resumed. People began to gather themselves, lining up, checking phones. "Well," he said. "Well," I echoed. We stood facing each other, the whole ridiculous beige lobby swirling quietly around us. "Thank you," I said, "for last night, and the bar, and the whiskey crime, and for not treating me like I was breakable." He smiled, one of those small, genuine smiles that start in the eyes. "Thank you for being the kind of woman who'll break into a bar with a stranger," he said. "It makes me feel better about the world." We didn't kiss goodbye. We didn't make a scene. We just held each other's gaze for a moment longer than two strangers normally would, letting the weight of the night settle gently between us one last time. "Safe flight, Maya," he said. "You too, Daniel," I replied. And then the current of the morning crowd tugged us in different directions. "Sherry, I'm not writing this because I think everyone should go and find a storm and a stranger and a hotel bar to break into. I'm writing because for the first time in a long while, I let myself step out of the neat little lines I'd drawn around my own body and desire. It wasn't planned. It wasn't sensible. It was, however, very clear. Clear in the way his eyes kept finding mine in the chaos of the airport. Clear in the way my body leaned towards his on the bus without my permission. Clear in the way my hands didn't tremble with fear when I pulled him into my room, only with wanting. Sometimes, after a season of being careful and reasonable and good, what you need is not another self-help book or another conversation about working on things. Sometimes you need one night in a nowhere hotel with a man who looks at you like you are exactly as alive as you feel in that moment and lets you lead as much as you follow. One night where you are not a partner or an ex or an employee or a daughter. Just a woman with a pulse. A woman whose flight was cancelled, but whose body, for once, wasn't. I went home the next day. My life didn't explode. I didn't run away or tear everything up or turn that night into a new relationship. But I did bring something back with me. The memory of what it felt like to be pinned playfully against a hallway wall, laughing into a stranger's mouth, knowing that for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for my life to start. It had, for one storm-stolen night, already begun. If you've ever had your own storm-stolen night, or wished for one, you're not the only one. When you're ready to put it into words, you can always write to me. I'm Sherry. This is Dust of Passion. and I'll be here, waiting for your next letter.